For decades, the tales of Jules Verne have inspired the imaginations of millions. Whether from books or films, cartoons or computer games, the stories of adventure and scientific fiction have seeped into the culture of the globe. "20,000 Leagues Under the Sea", "Journey to the Centre of the Earth", "From the Earth to the Moon", and "Around the World in 80 Days" are just a few of the extraordinary journeys that Jules Verne immersed us in. Captain Nemo, the Nautilus, and Phileas Fogg are household names. The stories have changed, sometimes from manuscript to published novel, but more so as they became motion pictures. Projectiles became rockets, ships and trains turned into balloons, and fiction, with some science, became science fiction. Almost immediately, biographers and critics began to analyse the writings and the man behind them. Some have claimed that his novels contained a pseudo-sexual message, and others that he points us towards a hidden treasure buried by the infamous Knights Templar. To a great many more, Verne was the father of science fiction, and others claim he simply stole ideas and reformulated them. But what is the truth? Was Jules Verne trying to relay a message? Or were his books just simple fiction for children? Was Verne a masterful genius or a storyteller with an overactive imagination? His wife said that a secret burned at the heart of Jules Verne and that it almost crippled him. What was this secret? This work investigates the man himself and those that surrounded him in order to discover the truth. We look closely at his most famous extraordinary journeys to try and discover the key to unlock the mysteries of Jules Verne. What we discover opens up a world of ancient secrets like never before. Jules Gabriel Verne was born on February the 8th, 1828, into a France that was in almost constant turmoil. Revolution, republic, restoration of the monarchy, empire, and revolution again seemed to be the political world in which young Jules was fostered. He was raised in the busy port of Nantes, where he spent a childhood of wealth, fun and exploration as the eldest of 5 children. Here, it was as if the political battles of Paris were a million miles away. His mother was Sophie. She had no profession, but was happy, kind and incredibly imaginative. Always loving and affectionate, Jules Verne would hold her dear to his heart, and in his youth he wrote beautiful poetry in her honour. His father, Pierre Verne, was an attorney, and Jules was expected to follow in his father's footsteps and to one day take over the family business. But Pierre was also highly religious, and his spiritual fervour often led him to self-mortification, fasting and physical self-punishment. According to Jules Verne's grandson, Pierre would self-flagellate using the infamous scourge, a kind of whip with multiple thongs. This simply had to affect the young Jules. In fact, Jules Verne himself would suffer at the hands of his father with beatings and starvations, and this would also deeply embed itself in his mind. It is possible that the timid nature of Jules Verne in later life may have been a result of these times. However, to many biographers, it was in Nantes and the family's summer retreat on the Loire River that the young Jules Verne fell in love with travel. He quickly learned about navigation and spent many hours messing around in boats, almost in an attempt to somehow escape the often harrowing home life. He and his brother Paul were sent to St. Stanislas School, where they heard tales of far-off lands from the boys that hailed from the Caribbean and New Orleans. Added to these were those of his seafaring Uncle Prudent, who often gave the children wonderful stories of South America and his exotic adventures. In comparison to their father, Uncle Prudent, with his pirate past and seemingly ancient figure of authority, must have been a blessing. Later, at St. Donatien College in Nantes, Jules Verne would study Latin and begin his begrudging journey to become a lawyer like his father. But his mind is already wandering at this stage, and he writes magical invocations in verse, which he stated later would never find their way into the public domain. This definite break from his father's religious zeal is an indication of just how early the young Jules Verne was seeking new and more exciting answers to the spiritual life. Jules Verne dreamed of sailing away and high adventure, but the strong control of his parents, Pierre and Sophie, would landlock the boy, but not his mind. He wrote in poetry and prose of almost everything he observed, and imagined and eagerly sought out exotic influences. At home, when the stars were out, Jules and Paul would ask their father to reveal to them the faraway worlds with his telescope, and they even imagined that one day they would be able to travel to them. Such was the period in which they lived, a progressive, forward-thinking period of such possibilities that the only boundary was the imagination, and Jules Verne's was already at full tilt. Of all the books of my childhood, the one I loved the most was Swiss Family Robinson. How many years I have spent on their island, how passionately I have joined in their discoveries, how jealous I was of their destiny. By the age of 12, Jules Verne saw the sea for the first time, calling himself the ambitious Robinson. It was also at this time that Verne entered his very first secret society, the Non-Borders Club, which included several future Freemasons and Rosicrucians, including the long-term friend Aristide Hignard. Many of these early friends would remain so for decades, and they would often work together in various ways. Indeed, it was with Hignard that Verne would make one of the most memorable journeys to Scotland, and the land that held a deep fascination for him. For Jules Verne, his Celtic heritage and family links to medieval Scottish archers was all he needed to find some legendary connection to more exciting times. He alluded to a noble past and had an air of Breton mystical tradition, that suited him well and was fostered by the imaginative input of his mother, Sophie. Now a young man, Verne moved to Paris, where he studied law, being introduced to various literary circles and entering the world of arts, much to his father's disdain. One strong point that we must remember from this period is quite simple. Most literary circles at the time were highly influenced and almost overrun by various secret societies. These included the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and the Golden Dawn, not to mention the possibility that the 18th century Bavarian Illuminati had already found a good foothold. We need not assume these links, however, for they are very open. Such writers as Alexandre Dumas and Victor Hugo were Freemasons, and both were members of the same literary circles as Jules Verne, and indeed were his personal friends. Another highly influential character for the young Verne, and a crucial key for deciphering him, was the great American Gnostic, Edgar Allan Poe. In 1854, the works of Poe were translated for the first time into French, and Jules Verne absorbed them eagerly, writing his very first science fiction novel, A Voyage in a Balloon, under Poe's influence. But why is Poe so important in understanding Verne's work? Well, not least because Poe was pioneering the modern science fiction writing, not just because of his incredible work in codes and ciphers within the novel, but also because of the spiritual and Gnostic influence he cleverly encoded in his works. The Gnostic influence upon Poe and from Poe has been widely stated, but for us to have the eyes to see this influence within the works of Jules Verne, we need to have just a small knowledge of its meaning and why it had to be hidden. The concepts that Poe adhered to, and indeed that fall beneath the surface of the world of secret societies, is one of dualism. The soul, the true self, is trapped beneath a world of materiality, and one must embark upon a sacred journey in order to find and retrieve this element, known as the divine within. For millennia, fables and folktales have hidden this basic psychological truth beneath symbolism, as if coding the ultimate treasure that all men search for. Know thyself is easier said than done, and one needs knowledge or gnosis in order to overcome the many trials and tribulations that will befall all those who embark upon the quest. In symbolic language, we must die in order to be reborn. We must kill the person we have become to find the person we truly are. This is the death and rebirth element found within the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, and numerous other supposedly secret societies. For centuries, these teachings were heretical to the Church, and so all manner of methods were employed to hide them in plain sight. Alchemy was one such method, and this kept alive the sacred teachings for several hundred years within the very Church itself. Even in the time of Jules Verne, such teachings were viewed as heretical, and Pierre Verne would certainly have disliked his own son's involvement in this world. The infamous Freemason Eliphas Levi wrote extensively on similar matters in France during the time of Verne, and was imprisoned for doing so. Jules Verne included this symbolism within his work, and this is why we find a constant repetition of the circular journey and a numerology of 13, a symbol of death. Before moving on, we would do well to remember that Poe's god was the god of the abyss. In spite of the diversions upon Jules Verne during this time, he still managed to pass his law degree, but he knew from the very start that his destiny lay in other directions. He wrote plays, operatic librettos, and many short stories, and drew the consternation of his father, who withdrew his funding. For a time, and with the help of his wise mother, Sophie, he supported himself as a kind of stockbroker, whilst continuing to meet in literary circles, gaining the aid and guidance of Dumas and Hugo. As if to offset his financial worries, he sought about for a wife, and following several near misses, he settled on Honorine de Vienne-Morel, a widow with 2 children and a good income. Together they had a son, Michel, who was to disappoint Jules, and the distance between them grew and grew. Nevertheless, Honorine encouraged his writing at first, and from 1857 onwards he actively searched for a publisher, failing again and again to draw their patronage. But then he met the man he would later call his spiritual guide, Pierre-Jules Hetzel. Hetzel was one of France's most important publishers, producing the work of Victor Hugo and the Freemason George Sand, amongst others. He saw something in Verne, and a lifelong partnership was formed. From this moment on, Jules Verne found fame and fortune, and latterly, and quite incorrectly, the title of Father of Science Fiction. The truth is that Jules Verne was not the father of science fiction. In fact, his novels barely resemble anything of the sort. If volcanoes, the hollow earth, sails and big cannons are science fiction, then so be it. However, he even distanced himself from the emerging genre, stating that his own work was based in real knowledge, unlike that of the new H.G. Wells, whose imagination knew no boundaries of real scientific knowledge. He left the stockbroker business behind and threw himself into writing and playing the literary game with his newfound friend Hetzel. In 1863, 5 Weeks in a Balloon was published, and 2 or more volumes were subsequently published each year thereafter. His writing and stage plays were now so successful that he had sufficient funds to buy a ship, the Saint Michel, which was replaced twice with even better vessels. In 1870, he was appointed as Knight of the Legion of Honour, and to this day he remains the most widely read novelist in the world. But his end was not so good. By 1886, his mind was not so positive, and his relationship with Hetzel seemed strained. Then on March the 9th of that same year, as he arrived home, his favourite nephew Gaston pulled a gun and shot him. The bullet entered his left leg, causing him pain and torment for the rest of his days. The next day, the papers were full of the story, but then something strange happened. Abruptly, the stories stopped. Gaston was whisked away into an insane asylum, never to be seen again, and the whole affair was hushed up. Nobody could discuss the event. Eight days later, Hetzel died, and within the year Sophie, Jules Verne's mother, was dead. Verne fell into a sombre attitude of mind, as if he had lost everything that was dear to him. His kind and imaginative mother, who had supported him in his search for individuality from his religiously intolerant father, was gone. His spiritual guide and replacement father, Hetzel, was no longer there for him, and his favourite nephew and replacement son had shot him at point-blank range. His world was falling apart, The psychological scaffolding that supported his very weakest parts had collapsed like a pack of cards. But death had already played a large part in the novels of Jules Verne, and it is time now to turn to the message locked away within these incredible works. Jules Verne's wife, Honorine, said that something burned at the heart of her husband, a secret that he could not openly share and which at times appeared to suffocate him. These secrets are those of the treasure hunters, the seekers after wisdom, and the world of the secret societies. Jules Verne was a storyteller who fell in love with the world of adventure and literature and wanted nothing more than to tell his tales. Once initiated into the world of the literary circles, Freemasons, Rosicrucians and various others, he was entrusted with knowledge not meant for all mankind, or as some would have it, the profane. This knowledge revealed the divine or God in his works, but not the Christ of any Christian denomination. No mention of Christ appears, but the grand architect of Freemasonry does. It revealed an initiation into the ancient mysteries, but not the rite of passage from the Holy Church. The world of Jules Verne is one of the occult, hidden from the eye, whilst all the time in plain sight. One way or another, Jules Verne would tell his tale, even if forbidden by the laws of those who passed on knowledge to him. In real life, he could not say a word, and this is why he destroyed letters, unpublished manuscripts, accounts, and personal papers before he died. It was the law of the societies from where he had derived his knowledge. But his novels were fiction, and he cleverly coded his own gnosis into them like a treasure map for those with the eyes to see. Not only was he aware of the heretical content that made him hide the knowledge from the church, but he also needed to hide the fact from his masters. According to several biographers, Jules Verne was hiding homosexual content in his novels, and on a perfectly Freudian level we can understand why this would seem so, but it is plain wrong. One biographer states that the fact there is a complete absence for the desire of women in his extraordinary journeys means that Jules Verne had no desire for women. This is missing the entire point and negating the fact that Verne married and bragged visiting many brothels in his youth. Extraordinary Journeys is the journeyman tale repeated again and again. And what is this journeyman? It is the tale of the path of the Freemason, a male society, a society of brotherhood. In this explanation alone, we have something the proponents of Verne's homosexuality do not: evidence. All those influences that surrounded Verne were from Freemasonic brotherhoods. Even his so-called homosexual partner, Hignard, who travelled, lived and wrote with Verne, was a Freemason. Brotherhood and the androgynous character are part and parcel of secret, occult and Gnostic work. The influence of somebody like Edgar Allan Poe and the Gnostic secrets are in fact rife in all Verne's extraordinary journeys, and even in the work from his youth, which included the witch Abraxia. This is a wordplay on the Abraxas, which is a Gnostic god who reveals wisdom. In truth, if Poe was the American Gnostic, as many have claimed, then Verne was the French version. We have already seen how Poe and Verne were interested and utilised codes and cryptograms within their work, and in Verne's work these appear right from the start and begin the hero on his journey. The novels begin with a fortuitous discovery of a clue or message which needs deciphering. The discovery of the true treasure will only be revealed once the hero has solved the puzzle, which very often takes the whole novel to do. In fact, the clue is not just in the original puzzle, but is laid out before us in the entire work. This is a Freemasonic method, and Verne hinted at this in his book, In Search of the Castaways, when he explained that Masonic lodges were signs of civilization. While humanity is taking a material path in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or indeed almost any of the other works, our hero is sent on a quest to discover something else, something which lies beyond materiality. Captain Nemo has left the world of man behind, and in his own words, he is dead. He is in fact dead to the material and exists beneath the waves, under the current of the times in the other world of the spirit and the mind. Phileas Fogg argues with the members of the Reform Club, the social elite of the material world, that they are wrong and that his journey will prove it. Captain Hatteras, in the Adventures of Captain Hatteras, wanders the world of man, taking no part in it. In probably the most famous of Jules Verne's novels, Journey to the Centre of the Earth, we have the prime example of the holistic Freemason and Gnostic approach taken by Verne in his fairy tale retelling. Quite apart from the fact that he invokes the Mason's grand architect in the book, we also have mention of the square and compass, the plumb line, and the coded true snails, which in French means masons. Journey to the Centre of the Earth is the path of the initiate. It is the trail which leads to the discovery of the self. And here Verne uses incredible alchemical symbolism on every level. The story goes that Professor Lidenbrock and his nephew, Axel, must travel across Iceland and then down through an extinct crater towards a sunless sea. This is the primordial water, the invisible gateway or barrier of the mind, from consciousness to unconsciousness. Only by passing these waters will we find the true original self, and in this story, this is represented as the origins of mankind. This is a psychological journey of battles to overcome and darkness to see into. Discovering the true self is often like this. We don't know what we shall discover, and sometimes we lose our way. But we must continue the journey nevertheless. It is no different to the initiate entering the temple or lodge in darkness, undergoing trials and tribulations, making various sacrifices before the ultimate one of all. Here he must die to himself and be reborn. Just as our heroes of Journey to the Centre of the Earth are reborn like the phoenix from the fiery volcano. Lidenbrock refuses to give up his journey, stating that he will make it to the centre or die. In truth, the greatest of all Masonic symbols is the dot in the centre of the circle, a place of peace, the place where the true self resides. It is the perfect symbol, reflecting the Hermetic axiom, that which is above is like that which is below. The particle in the centre of the atom reflects the true source of energy and empowerment, and our connection to this natural world is to find our true particle in the centre of existence itself. But the journey to the centre, to our very soul, must be in balance. We must remain upright at all times, and the symbolism of the secret societies, the Gnostics and alchemy all show this. It would figure then that Jules Verne ought to point this very important element out in his own work, and he does. Professor Lidenbrock takes his young apprentice with him on his journey, Axel, his nephew. Is this an indication that Verne was the guide to his own nephew Gaston, whom he loved as his own true son? Either way, the word Axel is indicative of balance and uprightness, and the two must trudge to the very pole of the earth before they can begin their journey. They must raise themselves up in balance before they can descend into the darkest elements of the mind. It is the tale of the initiation, the journey of master and apprentice. But why does Axel go in the first place? It is because he has listened to his feminine principle, his voice of wisdom. His fiancée insists that he go, for when you return, Axel, you will be a man. The journey is again repeated in From the Earth to the Moon, when a bet is placed to see if a man can reach the moon in a projectile when fired from a cannon. In all the works of the alchemist, one must begin with the stone of the philosophers, and the cannon or crucible is placed firmly upon the Stones Hill in Florida. In the follow-up book, we discover that the projectile is forced into lunar orbit and falls into darkness and shadow. This is part of the initiation process within the mind, and Verne compares the projectile to Mahomet's tomb, which legend stated existed between heaven and earth, somewhere he says he would rather not be. We also have a strange episode where the dogs on board raise a terrible noise, as if coming to life. The female is given the name of the goddess Diana, and Barbicane asks where Adam is to this Eve, so that new life can begin. A peculiar rambling about offerings to the Egyptian god Anubis, and how the dog should be cast in bronze by the king of hell, Lucifer, all revolve around the ancient mysteries revered by Freemasonry. The dog deity Anubis was responsible for resurrecting the great green god himself, Osiris, and Osiris is, in Freemason tradition, Lucifer himself. Of course, we must also remember that the dog is the very animal that the shaman would take with them in their journeys to the other world. Eventually, they emerge into the light once again, and following being trapped in the area of space known as the Dead Zone, they find the strength within to return to Earth like a bright falling star, baptized in the waters of the salty sea. Alchemy is hidden in the texts, and using a standard literary technique known as the quaternity principle, which implies that where there are three main characters, a fourth and important character will be lurking, we actually discover that Arni Saknussemm appears, or at least his descendant. This person is a prime informant, bringing information and knowledge, and who is in fact a famous but fictional 16th century alchemist. Other works also reveal a distinctly Masonic influence. In Robert the Conqueror, there is a Masonic temple, and in castles in California, Dubourg holds his set square, compass and plumb line to his heart whilst calling upon God. The Freemason motto found upon the coat of arms of the United Grand Lodge of England reads Audi Vidi Taci, and means hear, see and be silent. It is the exact opposite of the description of Aristobulus from the Green Ray, who is said to not listen, see nothing, and never be quiet. In the underground city, Harry Ford is called the solid journeyman and an apprentice, both terms used for Freemasons, and indeed Harry was the son of a Mason. There are strange but constant references to salt lakes and salt rocks throughout Verne's work. There is good reason. It is the Freemasons' role to create a new man and a new world. Salt is one of the three main elements from which the world will be built, for it is derived from the alchemical concept that salt is the unifier, the element of wisdom and science. It was more valuable than gold for many centuries, and indeed without it we would die. Is not Jules Verne the salt? Is he not bringing wisdom and literature in line with science? Closely associated with the Freemasons are the Rosicrucians, a society sharing brothers with the Masons and finding origin back in the 17th century. They hold to similar degrees and secrets, and are at heart full of Gnostic teaching. No wonder then that France at the time of Jules Verne was a centre of Rosicrucian teaching, and that much of this found its way into the work of Verne himself. The Rose and the Cross, or Rosicrucian, appears in From the Earth to the Moon, travel scholarships, and of course the infamous Around the World in 80 Days. The hero is in fact the master who rejects the material world and yet is master of it. Phileas Fogg is a member of the Reform Club, bearing the initials written by Rosicrucians, RC. He is a member of a brotherhood who must present themselves on the appointed day to their brothers, just as the Rosicrucian must. He is mysterious, holds great knowledge, and has second sight. Very similar concepts occur in Robert the Conqueror and Master of the World, where Verne points out that the path to truth can only be found by one's own efforts, and that we must follow the guide that is found within each of us. These were not just Rosicrucian sentiments. Verne used the exact same words. We are told that materialism will be washed away before the new day can come. The language used is almost that of the alchemist, with a great fire consuming all earthly matter, followed by a calm dawn and the revelation of treasure. But this is not a literal treasure hunt. This is the Gnostic search for the true self yet again, the burning away of the material desires to discover a more beautiful truth within. The name of this great hero, Robert, originally derives from the word for oak. It is the symbol of strength used by many cultures and societies, and is used extensively by the Freemasons, among them the famous woodcutters or carbonari. These were a branch of the Freemasons, also known as wood splitters. The term comes from the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus says, "Split a piece of wood, and I am there." It is a reference to discovering the true self, the divine within. The wood splitters were also known as the coal burners, hence carbonari, because the fire would reveal the true flame or light of the wood. In Around the World in 80 Days, Passepartout is the second aid that Fogg had employed, the first one being called the Forester. He is said to be a fine lad who had concerning his master the faith of the coal burner. Passepartout in French slang means nightingale, which is a bird that longs to see heaven, singing at the approach of a new dawn. Passepartout also means skeleton key, because he is the key to unlock the mysteries of the soul. Phileas Fogg is therefore the master of wood splitters or coal burners, and his very name Fogg is an indication of the clouded mysteries he holds. He guides the nightingale towards the new dawn. In fact, Verne makes a point of this by stating that the pair travelled around the globe in the opposite direction to the sun, that is, in the path of the moon. Phileas Fogg is the overall lover of fog and mist. Cloud and fog were often used as terms within secret societies to advise the reader that there was a mystery afoot waiting to be uncovered. His very traits are those of the perfect Freemason or Rosicrucian, gifted with second sight, travelling the world in spirit, not lavish and giving money for noble causes anonymously. He is the perfect journeyman. The god of the Freemasons and others is often termed the god of the abyss, the divinity lost in the darkness of the mind, which is truly the light. Christian fundamentalists have jumped on the great many references to Lucifer, the light bearer, who is the fallen angel and the very god of the abyss himself. Jules Verne virtually recreates Lucifer in Captain Nemo from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and he is often shown in mist and fog, diving into the depths of sea to gain not material goods, but knowledge and wisdom. Nemo himself says, "The sea is merely a supernatural, prodigious existence. It is living infinity." Nemo is an outcast of the material society. He is dead to the world, and yet he lives beneath the waves, unknown and untouched by the world above. He is the shadow self of us all, full of knowledge, living forever in a sea of infinity, which is the mind connected to nature itself. He finds Atlantis beneath the waves, a lost time and past of mankind. To the Rosicrucian, Atlantis was the spirit of nature, or first matter, requiring alchemical fixation in order to be transformed. This simply means that the true self has to be discovered and made complete and firm before one can grow. Atlantis was said to be built in concentric circles, and the true king and queen ruling at the very centre. This is the place where one can really rule oneself. But his home, the Nautilus, is not a place of the Christian God, for Verne states clearly there is no bread or wine. It is a place where this angel of light can peer into your very soul, as Nemo does to our heroes. Verne calls the Nautilus the sacred ark, the carrier of the light of the divine. But who is this man, Nemo? His name means no one, for he is everyone. "I have no name, sir," he says. However, we do find in the mysterious island that he is the son of an Indian Raja, and his name is Prince Dakar. This is what we learn in the book. From the age of 10 years to that of 30, Prince Dakar, endowed by nature with her richest gifts of intellect, accumulated knowledge of every kind. And in science, literature and art, his researches were extensive and profound. Nemo is the all-round man of knowledge, but with the special ability of being closer to nature than others. He is a true shaman in many respects, a master of gnosis or knowledge. We can see in this elements of the Rosicrucian nature philosophy, that by studying nature, man could learn all knowledge, and thereby aid society the better for it. Like the Freemason or Rosicrucian, he travels the globe anonymously. helping the oppressed with both goods and money. He is even said to have aided the Indian people in revolt against the British, a revolutionary implication very often applied to the Freemasons themselves. In Mysterious Island, his final port of refuge, Verne makes a bold statement about mankind, that it is lost forever because Nemo sinks to the ocean floor, locked away in his Nautilus coffin. As we have discovered, Verne calls the Nautilus the sacred Ark, and like the Ark, it is lost forever, taking with it our connection to the divine knowledge. But it is not the end. It is in fact the beginning in the paradoxical world of esoteric wisdom. Nemo is no one. His numerology gives us the number 13, symbolic of death, and of paramount importance to Freemasonry and other secret societies. But why should death be so important? The truth is quite simple, and it is the very death we should all seek. We must die to the old self, the self that grasps onto the material world. The ultimate symbol is death, and for Nemo to have finally died in this way, in the depths of the other world, then he has truly risen in glory. As one of Verne's heroes, Barbicane, and hence Verne himself, says, "If we die, the result of our journey will be magnificently enlarged. God himself will tell us his secret. In the next life, the soul will have no need of machines and engines. It will be identical with eternal wisdom." Whether it is the road of the journeyman around the world in 80 days, or the descent into the fires at the centre of the earth, whether it is the knowledge of one who has left the material world behind and living 20,000 leagues beneath the sea, or the journey from the material earth to the celestial moon, the truth is that we are being taken along a very ancient path of psychological initiation. Just because man has used his imagination over the centuries and clouded these simple truths in various forms of symbolism, societies and tales, does not mean that we should no longer seek the truth. Jules Verne lived in a period that was emerging from religious constraint. There was literary and artistic excitement, and Verne jumped aboard and went along for the ride. In fact, he very often steered the course. But behind the scenes there was a man who guided the way for Jules Verne from the very start. And it is to this man that we now turn in order to understand the extraordinary journeys a little better. Jules Hetzel was born in 1814 and died in 1886. He studied law in Strasbourg, but by 1837 founded a publishing company that was to become one of the most powerful in France. He was a well-known Republican, and in 1848 rose to Chief of the Cabinet in Foreign Affairs. However, following the coup d'etat of the Second Empire, he fled into self-imposed exile in Belgium, publishing clandestinely anti-government propaganda by such authors as Victor Hugo. Following a softening and liberalisation of the political scene in France, Hetzel returned and set about publishing some of the most famous French artists and writers. His most promising, and most lucrative of course, was Jules Verne himself. Although Hetzel's name is not registered on any Freemasonic rolls, this does not mean he wasn't a Freemason. The fact is that many lists were lost or destroyed, especially in the turmoil of the period, and especially if your political and business adventures were not always in line with Freemasonry. The remaining facts, however, seem to show that Hetzel, if not a Mason, was certainly well connected. A great many of his authors, such as George Sand, Victor Hugo, and Alexander Dumas, were Freemasons, and all of them friends of Jules Verne. Hetzel once said, in regard to the kind brotherly love that Freemasons adhered to, "There is no permanent love, but that which has duty for its eldest brother, so that if one sleeps, the other watches, and honour is safe." This is indeed the kind of very Masonic statement one would expect. Hetzel was called by Jules Verne his spiritual father, a replacement of his own real father, and for that of the church itself. Not only did Hetzel publish Verne, he censored him too, and often to the point of incredible rewrites. The dark, sombre endings of Verne were replaced with more positive and happy endings by Hetzel. The negative political statements are swiftly removed. Hetzel stated openly that he wanted to publish morally worthy books, as if he were doing a service to the nation, and so he amended Verne's work continually. Such characters as Captain Nemo were even changed from a vengeful Pole seeking revenge over the Russian Tsar to the character we know today. This in fact highlights a remarkable clue. It was Hetzel who remade the rounded figure of our otherworldly deity, and not Verne. And so it was Hetzel who was the master to Verne, the apprentice. No wonder then that Hetzel Publishing Empire was full to brim of members of secret brotherhoods. This may now bring to light the reason that Verne never argued about the measly royalties and the blatant disregard Hetzel seemed to treat him with. The truth may be that there was more to the relationship than author and publisher. Verne's novels, like any good fairy tale or death rebirth allegory, are circular, and it seems it was Hetzel who enforced this element in many of them, teaching the young Verne the rules of the game and bringing morally wholesome material for the masses whilst doing so. Like Ulysses, the tales of Jules Verne must return to their beginning, fulfilling the sacred code, the sacred journey back to oneself. And so, in our analysis of Jules Verne, his writing and his friends, we have come away with a glimmer of another world. This world is one of secret societies and occult knowledge, often hidden from our eyes, for a great many reasons. But one question remains unanswered. Why did Verne's replacement son, his nephew Gaston, shoot him on that fateful day in 1886? It is said that just before pulling the trigger, Gaston said to Jules Verne, "You are being pursued. Someone wishes to kill you. There are people who have never forgiven you." Who were these people that pursued Jules Verne? And why would a supposed assassin warn his target of such a thing? Why did Jules Verne destroy his papers, diaries and notes? Had he written more magical invocations, as he had done in his youth? What secret was he hiding? The evidence reveals that Verne was in a revolutionary world of growing secret brotherhoods, which not only held sacred truths about ancient psychological methods, but were also creeping into vast positions of power. Government, religions, companies and literary groups were all overrun by Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Golden Dawn and Illuminati members, and all were linked together with the thread of ancient gnosis. They aimed to create an upright society of high moral standing, a New Jerusalem, or so we are told. Was Gaston involved in this world of intrigue? Had he learned too much, or was he the victim of a plot against Jules Verne himself? The question has to be asked. Had Gaston somehow been gotten to? Was he under some drug-induced control, able only to mutter those few words of warning? Within days, the whole issue had been entirely covered up, and Gaston shipped off to an insane asylum, never to be seen again. The newspapers were silenced abruptly, and that kind of power can only be wielded by men of notable authority. A few days later, the great Hetzel himself was dead, and Verne would fall into a bleak state of mind, deepened by the death of his loving mother Sophie within the year. His books now emitted a new darker element in the absence of Hetzel, and political statements abounded. Suddenly, a positive attitude towards mankind is missing from Verne's work, and the Almighty begins to issue vengeance. Humanity itself is threatened with extinction, as if Verne is offering us some kind of veiled warning against the religious and political leaders of the future. Whatever the case, the truth may never be known, for all our evidence is gone, save for a few pieces of paper still held by the Verne estate under lock and key. What we do have is a fascinating tale of the life of Jules Verne, often more fantastic than his own novels, and certainly more of a puzzle. The overlying moral of the tale is clear: beware with whom you associate, for the circle of life is continual, and what you sow, you may not wish to reap. In March 1905, Jules Verne fell ill with diabetes. Slowly, he fell towards the pit of death and was issued last rites on March the 23rd, eventually dying on the 24th. The world's press announced the death and tributes came from far and wide, but none from any academic. His family attended the funeral, but nobody came from the academy or government. His wife, Honorine, burned the final papers and documents as requested, and several years later the French managed to get enough money to build a statue. In a terrible storm, a tree fell and took off the statue's head. It lay in the grass for a year. Today, the name of Jules Verne is remembered and honoured by millions as the father of modern science fiction. But what was the secret that his wife said burned in his heart? Whatever the truth, his legacy is truly one of great storytelling and creative imagination, matched with the genius of coded wordplay and hidden sacred and ancient truths. There is much yet to learn from the extraordinary journeys of Jules Verne.